Seeing Roman. Having said that, and we are recording this as well, so just so everyone's aware, and I will turn it over to Dr. Roman. Thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with everyone. And I have to tell you that I'm doing something tonight that I've not done before. So please be patient with me as I find my way through some of these slides that I've never actually presented before. This is a brand new presentation. So it made perfect sense last weekend when I was working on it. We'll just see how it goes tonight. But thank you for your patience in advance. And so I really got to thinking about wanting to talk about the CVI range.
Like soccer stuff.
I'm going to just stop till people can mute, or we got it? Okay. And why this methodology is effective. This is actually a question I've asked myself for a long time, and I've asked myself, why does it seem more effective with some children or less effective with some children? And I have some hunches about that, but I'm going to talk you through kind of what I've discovered. Okay, so, it's been a little bit of a wild ride these days in the CVI universe. And you may have noticed that there have been many things that have been occurring, and the positive is it gives parents more choice. It gives educators more choice and therapists more ways to think about CVI. But it also creates some confusion, because how do you choose? How do you? And I want to give you just a tiny bit of history. Also, I want to share that if you didn't have this information ahead of time, you're welcome to unmute and just verbally speak up and ask me a question or make a comment as it occurs to you. I think that was the format I selected, because if you have something to say, I want to know what that is. So don't hesitate. So a little bit of history, because I think this will give us some perspective as parents and educators find more choices in the world of CVI. That Drs. Jan Groeneveld and their colleagues wrote groundbreaking articles describing children who have brain-based visual impairment in the 1980s and beyond. But that was information I first found, and that was so important to me, because there was a little box at the bottom of one of the articles that said, what is the difference between ocular and cortical visual impairment? And that was the first aha I had, that I, as a teacher of the visually impaired, I need to think about CVI differently. At the same time in Europe, people like Leah Havarnen and Gordon Dutton and some others were describing children who have visual processing disorders. But those articles, if you go back and look at them, and it's something I do in my course, I ask people to find early articles and see what they think about them. But those articles are essentially describing children who are able to fully participate in regular education, but have some specific visual processing disorders. That has come to be known as cerebral visual impairment. So it's important to know that there are these distinctions that have been started long ago. So those who had that were in this cerebral group, this European group, also had, in these articles, you'll see them, they report math scores, standard reading scores. They may say this child had a visual perceptual disorder based on a standardized test. Not maybe the children, it doesn't maybe fully describe the children that we are talking about, or that I'm talking about, that I've always talked about. So these terms, and this is very important, these terms, cortical and cerebral, are much more than a description of brain real estate. So you hear the doctors talk about, is it the cerebrum or the cortex, and one thing describes it better than the other. I'm not arguing that, and I'm not involved in that argument. I'm not a physician. I'm not a neurologist. I'm not a neuro-ophthalmologist. They're used to target a precise set of needs. Those two terms, cortical and cerebral, actually are not interchangeable terms. And they are used to describe two distinctly kind of different yet some overlap groups of children. The child requires and deserves, proper intervention, and one is simply not an old-fashioned term, which is something that I think some people think that cortical is what we used to say, but now it's cerebral. That's actually not true. they're really describing different populations. So in Cerebral, for example, I'm just going to go through this fairly quickly. Which they're talking about children with reading difficulties, including word reversal, facial blindness, having one or a couple of these, maybe one alone, figure ground problems, visual closure problems. When you look at something, can you tell what the whole thing is? Visual neglect. This person just doesn't use the left side of their body. Simultagnosia, can't process two things at once. Dyscalculia, can't, has a real distinct math learning disability. That would all be under Cerebral. These individuals are often identified around preschool or later because we don't really, those difficulties don't emerge until the tasks demand it. Individuals may require special ed support or from a reading specialist, PTOT, or even a vision educator. So it's not exclusive of vision educators, but it's a decision that the team makes. They may or may not be identified as educationally visually impaired. They may or may not. Cortical, this is very distinctly, and this is what I adhere to, demonstrate children with cortical visual impairment demonstrate the 10 visual and behavioral traits that were identified by Jan and myself and others, cannot visually access or interpret their environment, a social situation, or materials without specialized support and instruction. So this is about, I can't access this information. I can't make sense of it at all. It's not just I can't make sense of your face or I can't make sense of this worksheet. It's I can't access the near and distant world well. They will have a significant reduction in incidental learning, not necessarily true of kids with cerebral visual impairment, are visually impaired and require specific support from a vision educator and an O&M specialist. They often have complex needs, but not always. And at some time, their parents may report, this is very different than cerebral. They may report that they perceive their child as possibly not seeing early on. The medical definition will address the parts of the brain that are impacted. The educational definition adheres to IDEA. Okay, it's very important that we separate these. We have to separate them because we have different populations of people, medical people, vision scientists, educators, therapists. We all have different things that drive who attends our programs, and we may define these things based on different issues. So the physicians may say this is really a cerebral issue because of where the damage is. Fine, document that. But it's up to me as an educator to see if you have a profile of the 10 characteristics. So the educational definition says that a child has visual impairment, including blindness, that if even with correction, that child's vision adversely affects educational performance. No doctor looking at an MRI knows that. No doctor looking at a child's medical history knows that. The only way to know that is to do a proper assessment, right? So how will you know the difference? Well, assessment will tell us that. This is where we have to assess. And the CVI range is used to investigate the presence of these 10 visual and behavioral characteristics. It is not a test of visual perceptual abilities. It is not a test of reading disorders. It is not a test of learning potential. It is a measure of the degree of functional vision you have relative to the 10 characteristics. It's so specific. So the CVI range is this test that looks at the impact. It can be used with children 9 months to 21 years of age. There's still a myth. I wish I could do a whole presentation on CVI myths, but maybe that's someday down the road. But one of the myths is that it's only for babies. That's a myth, not true. It's only for children who have complex needs. It's never appropriate for kids who have academic potential. None of those things are true because we're measuring characteristics that exist in a diverse population. Okay, a score can be derived, and the score is also used to measure progress in functional vision over time. This is where sometimes it gets tricky. We have glasses in our house, but somehow I got a pint jar, but it's fine. So just for families, I want to say this last bullet is something you really want, because if your child is not progressing on the CVI range, this should be a red flag to make you sort of stop in your tracks and say, what do we have to reconsider? How do we change the environment? This CVI range score is critical. And even when it's not what we're hoping for with this nice smooth trajectory going forward, it's important because it tells us we need to regroup. Child I saw today at Pediatric View, the score was the same as when I saw the child before. And the most important question was, can we talk to the team? Can we reach out to your child's team? Because there's something not really being done properly. It was found to be highly reliable by Sandy Newcomb in 2010. We all know that Mark Borchert had some questions about the study design. I don't know if you remember, those of you who were in the room, it was quite a moment. And when he said, I don't doubt that the results will probably be the same, but we need to do a more scientific test, investigation. It has stood the test of time with a few revisions, and the final revisions will come after the Ingerman CVI range study is completed, which is occurring right now. So, God bless Mark Borchert, because the thing is, he's putting his money where his mouth is. He didn't like all of the structure of it. It was an educational study, and he wants a scientific medical study. And that's what we have. And I can tell you that we meet every 2 weeks. The training is rigorous. There's a statistician present at every meeting. There are 2 physicians. There are 2 reliability scorers. It is rigorous. So where is the CVI range being used? Well, it's being used in a lot of places, including, my original dissertation in 96, which was pretty, I guess it was pretty novel for the time. Then Sandy Newcomb's, the Ingerman study is going on now. There are the CVI range is being used in a number of studies at Cornell, for example, and other international studies, one that's in Paris. And it's being used to look at the natural histories of children. So the last one, Encoded Therapeutics, they're doing gene therapy, and they wanted to study how the child, most of the kids that they're studying have CVI. They're looking at a seizure disorder, and they want to have a beginning, before treatment, during gene therapy, and after gene therapy. They want to be able to measure the natural histories. And so it's being used in that. It's being used for a variety of studies in the communication disorders program at our department at Penn State. They're really, if you haven't read the articles that have come out from that, they're fascinating. And as fascinating are the studies being funded by Ability Central and the Bridge School conducting them, that show at the application of the CVI range and how it correlates with changes in children over time. And those results are astounding, actually, astounding. I'm blown away. The degree of the impact of these characteristics must be systematically measured, okay? And so without knowing that impact, instruction may be ineffective. And see, this is where we're going now. It's like, so what makes the difference? Why do some children, why is the Bridge School in California getting these incredible results? And why are some other places seeing no real change? It's because of the things I'm going to talk to you about next. So without knowing this impact, all the hard work people do may be ineffective. We can't just pick something off the shelf and say we're doing CVI. Another child I saw this week, somebody said the vision people they have a red pom-pom and they have red beads. The child scores way beyond that. Instruction may result in frustration. The student will experience visual fatigue or not, cooperate. Really what they're doing is telling you, I can't, see this. They may demonstrate avoidance behaviors or worse. And the student will be unable to demonstrate their competence. And that's really why we're all here, is to see, who are you? How smart can you be if I give you the right keys to open those doors? So the interventions that we do are those experiences and environments. They're not therapy, right? That are designed to be rewarding, because reward is critical, and reinforce the neuronal connections associated with the development of new pathways and new visual functions. In other words, this is all about visual plasticity. Plasticity is doing its job when things are going well, when a child's improving, when you see that score improve. That is not some random score. That is the result of plasticity doing its job. And there's a study that I wanted to cite here that shows one of the most important things I've seen in a long time, that showed that regardless of the cause of CVI, there is no single etiology, no cause of CVI, whether it's stroke or, hypoxia, or whether it is, a brain bleed, or there's no single cause associated with improvement in vision. Hooray. Hooray. This means that we shouldn't be separating children into tiers. This is tier 1 kind of a learner. This is a tier 2 kind of a learner. This is a tier 3 kind of a learner. They're all learners. And we should have no expectation based on the anatomy, the real estate of their brain that was injured, and then say, well, this child won't progress. Can't do that. These findings invalidate the anatomical explanation of CVI. So those who say you need to know exactly what part of the brain was affected because that will give you a prediction about how this child will do. Nope. I love this. By the way, this is the same thing I'm finding in my data, which are not yet published, but by the grace of God, and if the creeks don't rise, we'll get there. Okay, so why does the CVI range approach work? Well, this is the bottom line here. It's a method that partners with plasticity. And so it's more than just an assessment. It is actually, dovetailing with this mechanism that's attempting to actually create those connections to help that child move forward. So it's systematic. It uses results of the assessment to describe a child's current level of visual function. It helps us, rating 2 in the CVI range gives us a sense of what accommodations a child needs, and it helps us develop goals. So the assessment is fused directly, and again, that's a whole separate presentation too, but fused directly into what happens next. So I want to now, this is where I'm going to shift, and I want to talk about, this is something that, as I said, I haven't talked about before, but I came across this article. Someone in my course actually used this article to submitted it for one of their assignments. I was blown away by it and thought, oh, now I really get it. Because when I looked at this article that was published in the Journal of Speech, Language, and Hearing Research, these principles of plasticity align with what we're trying to do based on the CVI range approach. So these principles are experience dependent. Okay, we know that the brain changes based on experience. The eye might change based on biology, but the brain changes based on experience. That learning, and this is a quote from that article, learning is our best hope for remodeling the damaged brain. I don't like the word damaged, but that's what's in the article. So here are the 10 principles. First, number 1, use it or lose it. I think we all probably know that one, right? Failure to use specific brain functions can lead to functional degradation. You see, this image I love because it shows, where we want that brain to really get working and excited and make all those connections, right? That's what we're looking for. That vision is a highly plastic function in the brain. Unlike some other developmental issues, vision is one of those things that's really open to change. And we know from visual deprivation studies, those that they showed with the cats where they didn't give, visual input through one eye, that eye was forever impacted after a critical period of visual development. So this shows, like the graphic shows auditory deprivation and visual deprivation. And you can see how the brain just moves it somewhere else. Like if you don't have great hearing, it's the visual cortex is going to pick up some of that, and vice versa. It's for this reason that we want to really work hard to let the visual cortex be for vision, right? We want to ask, is the child stuck in phase 1 or phase 2 or early phase 2? Are they just stuck in those, 0 through maybe 4 scores? Are we really helping that child use it? Or are they forever being treated like they're in phase 1? Is instruction designed to match the CVI range score? That's a really critical question. So, we have to say this is where the CVI range is so critical, because we're going to consistently update those scores and then adjust what things should look like based on this new information. Or is there no sense of urgency and that the child's living in the perpetual now? So this is, I don't know who this child is. I found this picture in Google Images somewhere, and it just shows a child who's been exposed. You can see how they're kind of going for something CVI here, but there's nothing really okay. The materials sort of suggest phase 1, early phase 2, but the rules are violated, and so somebody didn't know what that range score, if one was even done, how it would dictate that. Early implementation of the CVI principles is critical. So it's important the vision be recruited and brought into balance with other sensory functions so that we give vision this boost early and intensively. Okay. Number 2, use it and improve it. In the article, the word is training, but I think you train animals, you don't train children. Training that drives a specific brain function can lead to an enhancement of that function. Boy, we all know that, right? You help a child with CVI, you put their food on a bright plate on a light box or put a light under it, and voila, no one ever knew this child could feed themselves. Right? So training that drives a specific function can lead to the enhancement of that function, of course. We have to have the belief that functional vision is expected to improve and that we're going to see these improvements as we watch the child's range score change. So I'm going to show you this first video that you might know this child. And this is a great example of someone who not only used it, but improved it tremendously. And so I'm going to show this little video quickly.
Which one? Oh, good. You corrected yourself. Very good. You're right. Okay. Find another card and have it go with its shape. Match it to its shape.
Look how little and cute. I mean, he's still cute, but look how little.
Touch the shape it would go with. Okay, good.
Okay. And so.
Good. Okay, find another one.
Okay, so or is this concept of using vision more about just being around something visually passive? This activity on the left shows this child using vision in this highly integrative way and using it, developing it, improving it, and applying it. Unfortunately, too much of the stuff that we see around kids with CVI isn't based on a range score, and the child may very well lose their functional vision on behalf of another function that works better. Number 3, specificity. So the nature of the training experience or teaching dictates the nature of the plasticity. Random approaches are ineffective. We have to be real intentional. Okay, and this is so important, so important. Again, working with kids with CVI is not about a bubble tube. It's not about a light box. It's not even about a bubbled word. It's about knowing what our goal is and being intentional in getting there. So here's one child with CVI, and
I think he's going to sleep.
somebody says he's going to sleep.
It could be. At least it's calm.
Okay, so I don't know who this child is either. This is another video that I just found, but I thought it was a great example of how So specificity means if this child needs to use a shiny moving target, probably needs to be in a dark room with a light on that. The adults need to not talk, and you need to place that object somewhere where the child can see it continually, not ask the child to track it. There's not much specificity here that I can see. Okay, so this is critical. What we do matters, and random sensory stimulation or meaningless vision time may reduce the chance that functional vision will improve or that learning will improve. The CVI range is useful in targeting the type and specific nature of the supports needed. So for example, Jane will track a light horizontally past midline 8 out of 10 times with 90% accuracy. You'll never see me write that. Or Jamel will make a choice of a favorite activity from an array of 8 board maker symbols. The question is based on what? Where did this come from? Where's the specificity? How? And so we forget that this, as our friend Gunjan said, you have to wear this like a garment. You have to think all the time about what you're doing and be very specific. Repetition matters. Does anybody have any questions or comments to this point? Because I'm just talking nonstop. Does anybody want to say anything about this specificity piece or anything else I talked about? Feel free to unmute. I can't believe nobody has anything they want to share.
I'll say something, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I thought it was interesting, the example with Jamal will make a choice of favorite activity. During our early intervention meeting just recently, for my son, the teacher, the visually impaired that we have, kind of made like his next goal very similar to that. It was she wants him to be able to pick a favorite toy out of 3 toys.
Yeah.
Is that appropriate?
Sure, as long as it's based on a range score.
Okay.
To me, so I want to know, so you said out of 3, right? And the key here is there's, board maker symbols may or may not be accessible to this child. They may not be able to interpret what they are. Maybe photographic realistic images, maybe with space between them, maybe a bubbled word to replace one of those, drawings that are hard to understand. So this is where it's not that, it's not always that the activity is a bad activity. It's just that we have to be very specific. Is maybe 8 is fine if your score is like 6 on the range. But if your score is 3 on the range, you have no business even being presented with board maker symbols unless you're learning to do this by total motor memory. So it's all about specificity. And that's one of the things I think is so important about why it sometimes works that kids' vision improves and why it doesn't. All right, so let's go to the next. Anybody else have anything they want to say or ask?
I have one question.
Uh-huh.
So on the last slide, you said that Jane will track a light horizontally past midline 8-10 times without accuracy or with 90% accuracy. And you said, I would never write that.
Right.
Can you explain why that would not be?
Yeah. Sure, because to me, that's sort of vision stimulation. That's an eye exercise that you can't really teach a child's eyes to move smoothly. They will do it if the brain is organized in a way that it can. And a child with CVI may do something more like fix and follow. So they'll fix on something and then move their head to follow it. That's perfectly acceptable. I want to get to what does a child want to learn? How can I help them have more power in their life? How can they communicate with me better? Tracking a light, I can't for the life of me figure out how that's going to improve that child's life. So to me, that's an eye exercise, and that's not something I even have control over. What I'm going to be, how that child's eyes are going to move. To me, that's not. It's the specificity to that is a little bit confusing to me. Now that doesn't. I'm not saying it's always wrong. I'm telling you from my point of view, that's how I see it. Okay, but it's all in my, again, it's all about making sure that there is really no place on the CVI range where tracking is even monitored. So again, if I'm following the CVI range principles, tracking wouldn't even come on to the playing field. What I would do is see if that child can scan what I'm asking them to look for. Can we, don't forget, we're going to start over here. See this bright yellow line? We always start at the yellow and look at each one. And maybe I light up each one until we get to the end of the row where the big red line is. That's fine. That's great. But I don't really care how your eyes move to do that. See what I'm saying?
I do. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay,
Hey,
anybody else?
Christine?
Yes.
I do. Hi, Christine. It's Ann. It's been a long time since I've seen you. I just wanted to share that to everyone here. This work that you have done has changed so many lives, including ours. My son is 10 now. And without this work, I mean, I'm like getting misty here, but without you and without your work, I don't know where we would be. And I'm forever thankful, and I will sing your praises and share your work forever.
Thank you very much, Anne. Thank you. And I enjoy seeing the updates from time to time. Thank you. So I think, and I really think the reason that maybe that can even be said is that I am a pretty intentional person, and I really don't like to waste a child's time or mine. I just don't. And if it does, something doesn't make clear sense to me, or the child's not enjoying it, or the child's not engaged, or the child's not in, one of the first things, I've noticed this with a few kids, and some of you know who you are. I've seen your children respond better when I ask them to do something hard. They just seem much, because it's actually bringing that motivation level to another place. So, okay, so repetition matters. I'm trying to watch the clock a little bit here too. Repetition matters. This is interesting because this doesn't mean drill and practice. This means that we can't have it be a one and done, like, drive-by vision services. It's been really hard during COVID and virtual learning. This has been a huge challenge, right? But the induction of plasticity requires sufficient repetition. You can't make those changes in the brain if that opportunity occurs on rare occasion. You can't learn, I can't learn a foreign language if I learn, 5 new words and then, in 3 months they ask me what those words were. I won't remember. So this then suggests we might need to question, or at least wonder, how effective consult services can be if it's consult only. When it comes to frequency versus duration, so taking a child out of a classroom and working with them for 30 minutes once a week, I would rather that child have, 6 minutes 4 times a day across the week. Because you can't turn the visual system on and expect it to stay on if you don't need it, right? So repetition matters. And so we have to think about the CVI schedule as a way to help with meaningful facilitation of opportunities across the day. This concept of vision time is a contradiction to the use of vision embedded into routines. So this is, again, I said, like Gunjan said, wear it like a garment, that the functional use of vision must be part of play, learning, self-help, social, and motor functions. Here's just an example of a CVI schedule that I think is particularly nice because it includes photographs. And the photographs really help the team know what it looks like. And so the schedule is a time of day, what characteristics are we targeting, and what are the specialized methods or materials we need to use during that activity. And it takes a while to make one. It's not like big fun, but it can be creative, and it won't work unless the whole team is involved. This is not the job of the teacher of the visually impaired alone. Every team member needs to contribute. During OT, how do we set this up? How do we do this? I have an OT who's been working with pediatric view since January 1st. And she is just like, she's got a dent in her head from smacking herself in the head saying, I didn't realize that. I didn't ever try that with light, And so this will help even the best therapists and teachers and families know how to specifically plan for these frequency times. Again, we can't leave it to chance. We have to have a plan. Intensity matters. So the induction of plasticity requires sufficient training or teaching. Intensity. I'm about as intense as they get, right? So I just exude intensity, I think. But the definitions of intensity include degree or extent, relative strength, magnitude, and vigor. I love those. So we teach with passion, with intention, and belief in your student. That this is not just something we cross off the list. This is something where we have to put ourselves into that child's shoes, and we have to make this big and important. Okay, so assumption of competence and reward. This is part of intensity, is making sure there's reward from completion of an effortful, not reproductive activity. How many children do you know that if you give them something, they're looking for a container to drop it in because they've been trained to everything you touch gets dropped into a container? That's reproductive. What I want to see is the child looks at this and thinks, oh, this is a block, but it's not exactly like the block I saw last week. We have to make this bigger and fuller and deeper. So these images show one of my friends that I see at Pediatric View, and this is probably one of the most intense tasks I've ever asked a child with CVI to complete. And you can see it's not too long ago because I have a mask on, and so does the child. And this was one in which a child who started out in phase 1, or maybe early from phase 2 when I first met him, but I think phase 1, he is now able to use such comparative thought and understand salient features at such a high level that he's creating rows of similar shapes, but then he's also asked to align an animal figure with that shape. So it doesn't have to match the shape. So the squares were frogs, the crosses were wolves. And then later, each one of those little tiles where his mom was given each one of those shapes. And I said, throughout the day, just ask him, pull one out and say, what animal was this? What animal was the circle? Oh, dogs or whatever. This is intense. And it matters. It matters. It builds and expands thinking. Okay. This is, a child who's doing an O&M lesson on the left, and there's no vision time. This map is being made for him to use using the CVI principles and aligned with his score. This young lady sitting in her bedroom has her talker with her all the time, because intensity matters. It's not about just, oh, you might have something to say because I'm going to get ready for you to have lunch. No, we're intense in this. We're all in. We are all in, and it matters. Look at her using her vision like that. Look at that eye to object contact. That makes my heart sing. Any questions at this point before I go on to time matters? Just unmute if you need to, any old time. So time matters. This is the 6th principle about plasticity and how it helps recruit change in the brain. Different forms of plasticity occur at different times during training or teaching. So again, I just want to say about time, again, there are children who miss entire periods of time because vision services aren't given to kids birth to 3 in certain areas. What? Consult, wait and see, siloed services that say, well, you do your vision time and I'll do my speech time. Time matters. There are things that are happening across time and in critical times. And I want to share this slide from one of the articles that was the key author is Sarah Blackstone. And this is part of one of the studies that was done to identify needs. And I just want you to see when we look at these individuals, we look at the different service providers, who receives daily, weekly, monthly, consult only, or none. Why is it that 21% of kids with CVI and complex communication needs have not gotten any vision services? How can that be? How can it be that O&M almost half of the kids never received O&M. Time matters. It matters. Okay, salience matters. There's one of my favorite words, right? So the training and teaching experience must be sufficiently salient to induce plasticity. This is one of my giant, this is more than just salient features. Now I'm talking about meaningfulness. Meaningfulness. It has to, what is meaningful to the child? And do we follow the child's lead? Do we notice what they're noticing? Do we find things that are inherently rewarding to the child? Or do we just say, here's your core words. Here are your core words. Let me say that properly. Maybe the child doesn't care about the core words. Maybe there's something else they would really like to tell you. So, when families that will come to Pediatric View may say to me, well, yes, we have a light box and we got a bunch of shiny stuff that we were given. Does your child like it? Well, I don't know. We don't really know what to do with it. Is it important to the child, or would they really rather do something else? So again, I'm going to show you about salience. So, this is my friend Jim.
Good boy, look up. You put your hands down a bit, relax a wee bit.
Dad learning to snowboard.
Then you did a good boy. Good recovery. Right, ready? Head up. Look along your shoulder. Flex your legs. Flex
Do
your
those
hands.
50
Good
things.
boy.
You'll be fine. So a video preview of somebody snowboarding helped him get ready to do this, and he wanted to do it because his family does this. His family does this. Does he just want to sit in the snow while his parents snowboard and ski? No, nope. Salience. It matters to him. Okay, let's see which one.
Shorter? Do you want to see just the explosion, or do you want to see more?
More.
You want to see a little bit more? Okay, let's see. Next. And we'll say Fletcher. We'll say today in what class? Today in. Where is her? What class was that? Was that math? Was it language arts?
Yeah.
That was for language arts? No, what class was that for? Today in? In science, we made, what did we make? We made a,
Okay, so his vision adaptations, the accommodations are in the iPad. They're salient because he's getting to make some choices. He's getting to help guide the direction of this instruction, and he cares about the explosions and various things that are in there. It matters. He doesn't have to be read an Elmo book, right? He's learning about science. This is what stimulates his brain. This is what, helps him go forward. It's both intense and salient. And then here is, let's just have a look at this. It's not very loud. I'm sorry. I'll try to do it over there. So she's making choices about what she wants to do, right? And so you see a lot of things there, right? You see, intensity, you see frequency, you see a lot of things, but this is also about salience. What matters? Like that you have some agency, that you have control over your life, that you have the ability to participate and have self-determination? Or do we just walk you by the hand over and say, sit on the couch? It's a very big deal. This is what changes your brain. Passivity does not. Age matters. This is really a tricky one. So plasticity occurs more readily in the younger brains. That identifying children at risk for CVI is critical, but it's never too late. Plasticity for vision continues at least into early adulthood, and plasticity for other functions likely as well. So why do so many children with CVI have to wait or not receive appropriate services at all? Right? I want to share with you that one of the things that is one of my missions is to I have an infant screening that really the results of which have been presented at international conferences, but have I written that article yet? No, I have not. So somebody needs to sit on me and make me do it, because we found pretty remarkable results. Let me show you how early you can see that a child might have CVI. Here's the first child. This child is not, oh, not that one, this one over here, back. Nope. So this, I guess, I want to stop this video. Okay. So you see the baby on the left. Baby closes his eyes to that bright light, which is what he should do. Here it comes again. And this is a baby who doesn't show signs of CVI. That's exactly what he's supposed to do. But look at the baby who is at risk for CVI, who has a neurologic condition that is associated with the causes of CVI. He doesn't do that. Here's what he does.
Do you want him midline? Oh, whatever makes him comfortable.
We need to notice this. We have to notice this. This child, that light, he should hate this light. Babies are photophobic. This is the earliest sign of light gazing, and there are several other things in this screening that help us know very quickly who's most at risk. And it turns out when we correlate that later, those kids who scored positive in the infant screening, and we correlate it with the CVI range around a year of age, there's like almost a complete overlap. So there's no reason we wouldn't, why would we wait? You know, age matters. Why don't we use all the plasticity this child has? And so even though we see children who have, I see, you know, lots of babies, and I'm glad to screen all the babies and do all that, we also have to know that this plasticity doesn't have a target end date, and that remarkable things can continue to happen when we employ, you know, start with a CVI range score, create a CVI schedule, you know, get the whole team on board, and understand these principles of plasticity, because all of these children have made, you know, tremendous growth. And then transference is number 9. Plasticity in response to one training or teaching experience can enhance the acquisition of similar behaviors. Near and far transference, it's called. So the application of a skill to a similar task. We don't just, you know, I don't really care if this child can, you know, find their spoon to grab it for feeding. I want to know that they know spoonness. I want them to know where you would use a spoon. I want them to know where you're not likely to find a spoon and where you are, and why a shovel's not a spoon. That we're going to not have this learning situate itself in a little tiny glass box and check off some data sheet and say 5 out of 6 times you were able to pick up your spoon. I want this to be infused into things that go way beyond this moment. Transference is actually, it's really about something more. So if this child with CVI can learn the process of salient features for an elephant, and you work really hard and you show them, you know, okay, this, you know, an elephant has a trunk and giant ears, and here's another elephant, let's find the giant ears, and here's a cartoon of an elephant, and you can still do it, and here's an elephant against some background, can you still do it? Great. But what happens when you push away from the table? Can you still do it? Or does your direct instruction, you know, does it actually transcend the moment? And transcend is the word I mean. Does it lift up and go beyond? And this is why we have to constantly think about, as we're moving through space, like, I'll be darned, did you expect to see that here? What do you think that is? You know? Or, you know, your teacher just pulled up her pant leg and look what's on there. That it's not about just what we can record on a recorded sheet for our IEPs and our goals. It's that learning has to occur in this broad and uplifted way. That's huge, huge. Again, one of the people I think who's most situated to do this is the O&M specialist. You know, taking this child out beyond the classroom, But if half the kids with CVI and AAC needs aren't even getting O&M, how's that going to happen? Okay. And the 10th one is interference. That plasticity in response to one experience can interfere with the acquisition of other behaviors. We often think of this, me as a developmentalist, thinks of this as sort of, the child is starting to learn to walk, stops talking, right? That's a classic example of interference. But interference can be sensory information that prohibits participation as well. And so I love this picture of this child. Unintended movement, color, sound, or pattern can preempt attention, participation, and learning. And so what this child knows and can do, when people say, but their vision changes all the time and they're not on today visually, maybe the environment's not on, maybe you're not on. Maybe the person working directly in front of the child has a bright red shirt on. Maybe there's noise in the background. Maybe somebody's singing. Maybe, it's both uncomfortable and fatiguing, and for some children, worse. So this is a very important principle about interference. And those who know CVI well are like fine-tuned to that. They're just so fine-tuned because they notice that sounds, and they're on the alert for what is that, what's going on, does that have to happen right now? Or you watch the child and think, well, you're no longer, attending because I know there's music. Let's just wait for a moment and see if we can wait till that child stops crying, or whatever it might be. Interference. I don't know that the child with the pom-pom where the teacher was talking and asking the child to track it, there was a lot of interference there. I don't even know what the teacher's goal was or that person's goal, but there was too much bombarding this child to even participate. So I've seen various things. I've seen kids cover themselves up completely head to toe on the playground. Just, that's way too much. This little girl, this is an actual picture of a little girl who, when there's too much stuff going on around her, she wants to wear her raincoat all the time. And she also loves her umbrella, which she puts up and puts in front of her face. That's not a behavior that should be modified. That's a signal that the environment needs to be adjusted, or we can't ask her to do this challenging thing at this moment. And kids will block their ears and they look at, that look of distress, like, I can't right now. This is, I'm showing you I can't. Let's watch this for a moment.
Good job. Can you get another one?
Okay. Beyond the alert for interference. Now, again, I'm no criticism of anybody who's working with kids. We do these things without thinking about it. And what I'm asking is that we start really, really being intentional. Okay.
Get another one. Can you get another one out? Good job. Good job. Thank you. Can you get another one?
That's interference. That child's using the light box is there, but you see he's just all tactual. He's all tactual. Can't use my vision there. So I want to say, kind of as I bring this little hour to a close, and leave a little bit of time for questions or comments, that there are many choices. You're going to have many more choices now than when I first landed on this CVI planet. And I would say that information about CVI is becoming plentiful, but I beg you to be choosy. Be choosy, because the path you take can really lead you in one direction or your child in one direction versus the other. Everything is not equal. And so start with whether this program was designed for a child with cortical or cerebral visual impairment. Start with that. Think about what your child needs, and think about something that makes it accountable. A score is accountable. If that score doesn't change, we all know that. Not everybody wants to be accountable. They want to just say, I'm doing a good job. But I hold myself to that standard. I think we have to be accountable. We have to ask ourselves, how did this really cool thing happen and this child shows so much progress? And on the other hand, why aren't they if they're not? Okay, so plasticity is not automatic. It is experience dependent. every day your child goes to school, or every day they're getting, in-home therapy or outpatient therapy, the experience they're getting is either adding or subtracting from that visual plasticity. Choose the experience or create a path that is systematic, cohesive, intentional, and sets a high bar with a sense of urgency. There's no tomorrow. There is today. There is no waiting till tomorrow. The path you choose can and will make all the difference. And if your child or your student is not progressing, find a new path. Choose a path that enlists plasticity and leads to the quality of life. Vision is not worth anything unless it's actually helping this child do more, be more, enjoy more. Okay? And these are some examples of some kids who have made, tremendous progress. And I think in all cases, there was a very clear path for them. And all three of these children, I know their programs are based on the CVI range. You have to have a system. You have to have a system. Okay, so I want to stop there. I'll stop sharing. I want to thank the families who let me share images of their children. This is my email. You can contact me if you need me. And now, are there any questions in the last couple minutes?
Christine, I have one. It's an observation, and I kind of want to get your feeling on it. Okay. So now that kids are back, like Thomas is back in school, and he was out last year due to health issues and COVID. Back in school, wearing masks. Classes are smaller. Recess is smaller. We're not getting any of the drama of they don't like me. I don't know what they say. We're not getting any of that. He goes, Mom, now I just have to listen to what they say to me. And I know by the tone of their voice, how they feel. Have you heard that from other families and other kids, that masks have been an absolute and utter blessing? Like, he can do school now. I mean, things are still hard, but he has the capacity. The behavior is not coming out like it used to. He's got room for learning and room to actually. Okay.
I have heard that. Now, some kids, it depends on what they rely on the face to tell who somebody is. But if it's this part of their face, then that will be helpful. Other kids have not had that experience. It just depends on the child. But even things like sort of hybrid programming has helped kids because fewer kids are in the class. All kinds of things. We've learned a lot. How about taking down all the stuff off the bulletin boards and the walls? Because during the height of COVID, people thought that was maybe dangerous. Well, kids with CVI were blossoming. Like, thank you. This is good. So there have been some strange things we've learned.
It's been really interesting because now he can come home now and look at our faces and understand and take, some of those little changes to our face, because we really try to work on that. And now he can take it and use it. And I found that to be really interesting. But I know, in the same vein, that if it's blocked, it's not helping certain aspects. But I just wanted to share that and, kind of see.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything they want to ask or share? There's my email again. Somebody asked for my email. There it is. Any questions or any thoughts?
How often or when do you know when you should get a new range score done?
So two ways. One is if the child's very young, first year or up to 3, I think 2 times a year is good. But after that, I think at least annually. But you don't necessarily wait, because if the child's showing changes, if all of a sudden, your child notices something at a distance you never thought you'd seen before, it's likely that not only has distance viewing improved, but all the characteristics usually improve together. They kind of all move as a tribe. So when one characteristic improves, you can pretty much guarantee others have, and then I wouldn't wait. I would just have another CVI range conducted to see where we are now, because you don't want to lose time. If you need to adjust upward because things are better, but also when I say adjust upward, I don't mean get rid of supports. They just change. The child with CVI, even in high phase 3, is going to need supports intensively. Their vision's on all day long. It just that we want to make sure the supports match. This is, salience. It has to match. It has to matter. It has to be accurate. So I just want to say that, yes, the answer is yes about the stroke. What I want to say is that we have to be just really specific about this and make sure that you're seeing this child change and that they are really engaged. And if they're not engaged, it's our stuff. We have to find different things that will be more interesting. So there is a question here I'm going to try to read that says, have you ever gotten a child who did have a huge amount of both occipital lobes destroyed by stroke and still closing her eyes with light as an infant? Mine only started to pay attention to backlit devices on phase 2, so it was confusing. Yes, so some children will be photophobic, and actually I have seen children who have had strokes, that have affected both sides of their brain in their occipital cortex. And again, all I can say is we have to assess. So remember that progress is not dependent upon what happened to your brain. It depends upon what we do. Now, are there some exceptions? Yes. If a child has seizures all day long and never stops having seizures all day long, that's the brain's primary thing at that moment, right? If the child's really sick or really hungry, that's going to preempt some progress maybe at that moment. But those, I hate to almost say those things because there are really no excuses. And so it's a very small amount of children who don't progress, and other things like degenerating brain conditions. Of course, as the brain goes, so goes vision. But the majority of children with CVI, we can expect progress. And there are parents here now who could all tell this exact story. I'm not the parent of a child with CVI. A little bit, Dagbjorn. I do understand that you all have these stories and this progress, and what you have the good fortune of, those of you whose children have really progressed, you have the good fortune of figuring this out early. You have the good fortune of figuring it out well. It doesn't have to be birth to 3. It's great if it is, but it's the most important thing, I think, are those 10 principles, really honing in and making this meaningful and important. If the child doesn't care about it, not much change is going to happen. So think about those 10 principles and see if that helps. Any other questions anybody wants to bring up? Midnight in the UK. How about that? One of the children you saw, you probably heard an English accent. Yes, you did. Okay, Cullen.
So Dr. Roman, thank you very, very much for doing this for the PCVIS. I know I speak for myself, my family, and for Griffin. We wouldn't be here and we wouldn't be where we're at without your work, and it has made such a big impact in our lives. And I can tell you, looking at stuff and talking to people, that your work has made such a big difference in all these other children's lives, and the providers being able to help their children as well too. So we thank you so much for taking your time to be on here. I know that your time is really valuable, and I think this helped out a lot of people once again. So thank you so much.
Yeah, well, everybody, just as my last shot, I do this work for you. I do it because of families. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Okay. Colin, will you be closing the meeting?
I think Sarah will. Sarah,
okay.